We're live. Woo! Tanya class. This is part 2, but really part 1 because last week was the intro. So, what is Kabbalah? What is Chassidus? What we're going to be talking about. Whoever is joining us or watching the recording, I'm so happy you're here, and thank you to my live audience for coming as well. Today's class is going to be covering the very beginning of Kabbalah, the origins of the universe in Kabbalah, how everything began from nothing, how the world came about from nothing to the world that we have now, what began it all. And there's a lot of parts to that. And today's class, we're going to be covering Tzimtzum, the very first part, what was needed in order for a world to exist, what existed before our world was here, and what the Tzimtzum that caused it. So if you don't know what Tzimtzum means, Tzimtzum is a Hebrew word or a Lashon word in ancient Jewish language, Lashon HaKodesh, which means contraction. So Tzimtzum, it means to remove, to make smaller. So to take something and make it smaller, Tzimtzum. So to make something more concise, to create something in a smaller way. So we're going to be talking about the Tzimtzum today and a lot more about that. Let's grab a marker. So I'm going to write the word for you. We're also going to be talking about other cool words in Kabbalah, like Chalal, Makom Panui, Kav, Rishimu, and lots of other cool things. So I'm going to write the word in even a little bit bigger, the word Tzimtzum, so you can see it. So Tzaddik. I forget sometimes how to write real. This is the word in Hebrew, Tzimtzum. Okay, so let's dive right in. So the concept of Tzimtzum dates all the way back to the earliest Kabbalistic texts, even before the Arizal. So in Kabbalah is a receiving of the transmission, which means transmission of the secret of the Torah. The first written text that we have, the first comes the Zohar, which was written. But the Zohar, like we mentioned in the early class, is like, I heard a really good example for it. It was like an unreadable book, a book of that if you read it, you wouldn't understand anything inside it. And then afterwards came the book of the Arizal and the Ramak, Rosh Cordovero. In their books, in their Sfarim, it was like the keys to decoding. It was the structure of how to understand the Zohar. It gave us the structure, and with their books, we can now go back to the Zohar and understand it through the structure. So Kabbalah is a very structured, it's a very structured theology. So that Rizal goes into depth, even though before that there's mentions of the Tzimtzum and how Hashem created the world. So the Rizal speaks of the world before it exists as we knew it, even though time is a creation and there was no existence of time. But prior or pre the concept of time, pre the concept of our world, it says that the Or Ein Sof. So this is another good word to remember. Or Ein Sof means the infinite light of God. All that existed was the infinite light of God, which filled every single space, and there was nothing other than that. And in order for Hashem, who desired to create a world with human beings who would keep the Torah, in order for that to exist, the first thing Hashem had to do is have a removal of self, which is the Tzimtzum. So the Tzimtzum is a removal, a siluk, a removal of Hashem's self, in order to create a vacuum, a void, a Chalal. That's a Chalal. The Chalal, Olam, right? We speak in Hebrew about the Chalal Olam, the space that we exist in. The Chalal also means the orbits or the planets, the orbs, right? Is a Chalal an orb? Or am I making that up? The world, the universe. The Chalal is maybe the universe. If we speak about Chalal, in order for this Chalal, this vacuum, this space where Hashem, where it can exist, so that an other can exist, Hashem first had to make a tzimtzum, a siluk, a removal of himself to make space for a world to exist, for something else to exist, right? So that is where tzimtzum comes in. So the Rizal says, before the tzimtzum, before a world, there was just Or Ein Sof Baruch Hu, the infinite light of God, filling up every space. How could a world exist if God was everywhere, right? Where is there space? So Hashem removed himself, and in that space, he let in a kav, a trickle of God's light, a trickle of light, and from that light began to create the world. And we will continue to learn the entire Seder Hishtalshalos. This entire discussion that is very structured in the Arizal and on other Kabbalistic texts is called the Seder Hishtalshalos, the order or the chain of the creation of the world. There's a lot of steps that happen. First, there was the Tzimtzum. There was just God. Then there was the Tzimtzum. Then there was this Chalal, this vacuum, this void where God was not. We'll get to that soon. In that void was a Rishimu, something left, a remnant or a hint or a scent of the divinity. Then there was a kav, and through that kav came the 10 spheros that brought a concealed, limited amount of divinity and divine consciousness back into the world to create the world as we know it. And from that became the many layers of the world. And then there are until we got to the world that we know, first came other worlds. So we're even going to talk about other worlds that existed before the universe that we know, which were shattered, worlds that could not exist. Then we're going to talk about the world that we have, the structure that we live in, which is 4 levels of existence, 4 consciousnesses, or 4 worlds that we call them, till we get to our world, which is the fourth world of Asiya. So we're going to go through all this in the next few classes. But today we're going to start with Tzimtzum because that is where it all began. It all begins with a Tzimtzum. And so this Tzimtzum, as it's written it led to a lot of controversy, even beginning with the first students of the Arizal. When the Arizal said that in the beginning there was all godliness and he had to create a vacuum in order to make space for an other to exist, for a world to exist. There is a commentary on the Eitz Chaim, which is the book of the Arizal's text, and there's a commentary of the Ramaz, of one of his students, who says lav dafka about the word Tzimtzum. He says lav dafka, which means not necessarily was there a full Tzimtzum, and he says there was a reshima remained, a remnant of God remained. Now, this led to two schools of thoughts, to two different strong opinions on what the Tzimtzum, whether the Tzimtzum was an actual removal of God's infinite light, whether he actually created a space devoid of godliness, like we learned from many of the teachings of Rachamim that leis asar Makom Panui More, that there is no place that God is not. God is found, like we sing, Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is truly everywhere, up, right? We have a whole book about it. Is he here? Is he in the sky? Is he in the ground? No matter where you go, right? Hashem is with you. So on that note, how can you say that Hashem created a space where he does not exist, right? What does that mean? So was there really a vacuum, a chalal, a void, this void devoid of godliness created? So let's imagine the world where everything here is infinite godly light, and now God removes himself and creates a siluk and this tzimtzum, this contraction, a removal of self, to create this void, right? A chalal, a vacuum over here. Now, according to how we would read it literally, there actually Hashem removed himself from this void. But then comes this commentary and says, wait a minute, God didn't actually remove himself for real. Lav dafka, it wasn't a real removal of himself. And let's go into that. So there became from that commentary and from that understanding two opinions on whether there was Tzimtzum Kipshuto and Tzimtzum Lo Kipshuto. And this actually leads to this difference of opinion actually led to some of the big controversies amongst Hasidic leaders later on, who some people like the Vilna Gaon and the Gra took the opinion that you have to believe that there was an actual siluk, which can lead you to believe that there are actually places in the world where God is not completely found. Based on that opinion, you would have to say that he would say, God forbid to say, people who follow that thought would say, God forbid to say that God is found in the bathroom. How could you say that Hashem is found in the bathroom? It's such a disgusting place. How can you say that in a sinner doing the worst thing, in a pig, God is found there? He's not found there. And for those who follow the opinion, including the Chabad and the Baal Shem Tov and many teachers who follow the opinion that there wasn't an actual tzimtzum, they would say there was a removal, a concealment of God's light. But we're going to talk about what it actually was. Although there was a concealment and a removal, it wasn't entirely. God still remained there. And later we understand that even those who disagreed on whether Hashem actually removed himself, even those who say Hashem literally removed himself and created a void where he is not, even according to that school of thought, they still agree though that there was a reshimu, just like in that commentary. They say, yes, Hashem removed himself, but there was a remnant. So an example is like a perfume bottle where you poured all the perfume, but it still smells like perfume. Something is left there. There's a remnant. The presence of the person is still there, right? They leave a big stink when they go, right? So the person may have poured out the liquid, but the godliness remained there. There was never a place where God's impact wasn't. So even according to that opinion, we still have a remnant of godliness in every space, although more contracted, less God. And according to the other opinion that says lo kipshuto, lav dafka, so this concept is one of the core, but not well known to even many people amongst who grew up Chabad. Even not everybody's is aware of this concept called Tzimtzum Kipshuto and Tzimtzum Lo Kipshuto. So it's something that once you understand it, it leads to a deeper understanding of a lot of things like Hashgacha Pratis, because there's two schools on Hashgacha Pratis. So the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, said that because there was a real siluk, a real removal of God's self, of godliness, therefore the Hashgacha that came in afterwards was a very limited Hashgacha. Therefore, you could say that not necessarily is God giving full Hashgacha and full divine ordained, is not every single thing Russia does, something wicked. He doesn't merit to have every step of his life divinely ordained and held and planned by God. And the school of thought that would say that God never actually removed himself fully, it was only a concealment to us, to our perspective, that school of thought would argue and say, no, even Russia, no matter who you are, every single minute of this world, it was all God never actually left. So what does that mean? Let's take the second approach. So there's the void. Let's take the approach. Here's the remnant, let's make it a little smell, right? Let's take the approach of, let's take on two sides. We're going to have lo kipshuto, which means not literal tzimtzum. Let me write that up. Lo kipshuto, not literal tzimtzum. So what does that look like to them? Not literal tzimtzum. That means, this is really deep and there's some great great examples to explain it. That means that although there was concealment of the light, Hashem only concealed his light, his infinite light, for us, so we can exist and not be completely overloaded with all of the light of Hashem, so that we can exist. But for Hashem himself, he never left the space. He only concealed it for us. So that would be like, I'm not closing the light. I'm only covering it so that you're not able to see the light. The light's still on. I'm putting over many barriers of concealment over the light so that the light doesn't blind you so you can fall asleep. So too, if Hashem would continue to reveal the consciousness of divinity in every place and all of his full consciousness, we would be completely, we would explode from it. For example, the Kabbalists explain it to like pouring boiling water in a cup that's too delicate to contain. It would explode. Or when this actually happened was by Har Sinai, when we were standing at Har Sinai and Hashem revealed not even the full infinity, but just his speech to us, and we couldn't handle it. Our souls left our bodies. Our finite bodies can't contain that much revelation. It's an overstimulation. And a modern example is when a website has too many people on it or too much information, right? What's it called? When it crashes, right? A website crashes all the time because it is too much. So if we're overstimulated, we crash, right? If we have so much input coming in all the time, then we crash. We can't handle it. We can overload. We can get overloaded, overheated, right? A computer gets overheated when it has too much information. So in order that we can actually exist and not expire, and Kabbalists actually say that if we would be fully absorbed in God's light, we wouldn't even be able to exist because we would just be one with the light around us. There would be no separation. And so another example that to understand this, so to put it, let's go backtrack a little bit. We discussed Tzimtzum, that in order for there to be a world outside of godliness, because he filled every space, he had to first create a Tzimtzum, a vacuum, a void where he is not. And in that world, in that void, he can create the world that we live in, right? Where everything begins. There are two schools of thought of whether there was literally a removal of God's self, or not a literal removal of God's self. The opinion who says there was a literal removal of Hashem, their opinion is that there was a Rishimu. God was always present there, but not to the same extent. He did somewhat distance himself or make a space where he wasn't as much there. There's only a remnant of God there. That really gives room for the opinions of those who say that God's hashgacha pratis, God's providence and divine providence is not in every single detail, not for every single person if they don't merit. There might be places where you say, godliness isn't there. We hold, or Chabad Chassidim holds, the majority, or the hold that either way, that hold that Tzimtzum lo kipshuto, that the Tzimtzum wasn't literal. It didn't actually happen. And that means that Hashem never left at all. His infinite light remained in this void that he created. It remained there the whole time. He just concealed it for us so that we wouldn't be blinded by the light, by the infinite light, so that we can have our own independent existence. He withheld himself and covered and put coverings over it for our good, for our perspective. Or from his perspective, he remained there the whole time. And the mashal that comes to my mind of this is when I'm sleep training my baby, right? And I need them to fall asleep on their own. And I'm waiting by the door with the door open or even in the room, right? But I'm not letting them know that I'm there. And the baby needs to learn how to cry themselves to sleep. So they think that I'm gone. But really, I've never left. I've been there the entire time. I'm not going to sleep, right? So the baby thinks I left them. They have to learn how to fall asleep, but I've never left. And it's called a dual reality. So this is what's called a double reality. Das Elyon, in Hasidic terms, it's called Das Elyon and Das Tachton. Das Elyon is how it looks from above, from Hashem's perspective. So it's dual perspectives. From Hashem's perspective, I'm here the whole time. I never went anywhere, right? But from our perspective, we don't see Hashem because he covered himself. He concealed himself, and in order that we can have our own identity and our own existence. Yes, right? So that is a 101 understanding or the concept of Tzimtzum. So hopefully we understand now that the Tzimtzum is that contraction where Hashem removed himself. Now what we're left with is this vacuum, right? This void where either it's the godliness is not there or Hashem is there, but he covered it. So what we understand it is this other concept called a masecha, a partition, a film. And it's really easy to understand, right? We have this blinding light. And if I put it right here in front of the camera, you don't see nothing, right? But if I put something in front of it, like a paper, then the light is still shining just as bright. The light hasn't diminished in any way, but there's a covering over it or a film in order to diminish the amount of light that you see. And that's how we understand the coverings of the world. So the Tzimtzum actually happened in stages. There's levels of Tzimtzum. So this is really deep. We're going to get to this more. So hold this Tzimtzum thought. When we get to the four worlds and the four realities that we live in, we understand now that different levels of the world are not actually different worlds. Rather, we have the world that we live in with different levels of coverings of how much godliness and God consciousness is covered for us. Because if we would live in the consciousness of divinity all day, we couldn't function, right? We would be walking around. And it's actually there. If any, they actually there's a really good. We can understand this a little bit through anyone who's taken psychedelics. It somewhat experiences this in a certain way. It seems to be that when someone takes psychedelics, there's really a little bit of the amount of God consciousness that's flowing into this world from the Tzimtzum. There's a little bit less filters, so they suddenly they have more access to they have less filters. Remove some of the filters that we have in us, built into us to conceal godliness and God consciousness from us. Some of those when someone takes a psychedelic, they transcend some of those filters. They shed some of the layers that cover them, and suddenly they're ascending to higher level of consciousness, and they could feel one with everything and one with the world, because that's truly the reality. The real true reality is that you are me, I am you. We're not separate, and I could never, the same way I could never hurt my one hand can't hurt my other hand. I would never cause. That's how I can feel it with every Jew in the world, is my brother or sister. I love them. I'm going to help them even if I don't know them, and that's how I've been treated by people all around the world, because they are truly, we're one. But we often argue, and we often have strife and fighting and jealousy because we don't get to see the divine consciousness. We don't get to feel and tap into it. And if we did, a little bit of that is actually better for us, right? But even if we had more God consciousness, we could still exist, right? But there would be less free choice. So this, we could still exist. We want to shatter from a little bit more divine consciousness would do us all a little bit good. We can be less jealous. I can see that all of us are part of one organism. No one is different because of their skin color, because of the language that they speak, because of how they dress, because of the minhagim that they keep, because they have political beliefs to one side or the other side. I can understand that we're all one organism and we're all one being, and it's like fighting with another part of you. So it would do us good. But if we would be able to see the true reality of everything, it would leave us with much less free choice. So having all the concealments is in order that we live as a true other, where we can truly feel an other, and we can feel like our own independent existence, and we can feel different. I can feel separate, and I can choose to do kindness. My kindness comes from a real choice, from having, from feeling my ego and allowing for myself to have a true ego, and still being able to overcome that. And that the partitions that we have allow us to experience that true conflict, inner conflict, where we have a real ego. When we can transcend some of the films, we transcend our ego, right? And ultimately, what we're in this world to do is to remove the Tzimtzum a little bit on our own, not for Hashem to remove it for us. But we're here in this world, and our work every day is to try and transcend the layers of covering, and try to see past the partition, and try to clear up the fog that we live in every day, and try to see things as they truly are. That no one, we're all part of one organism, that we're all one. Am Yisrael, we're one creation, we're one being. All humans are part of one reality. How everything flows from godliness, how everything that happens to me, I have no reason to be angry or jealous, because I'm going to get whatever I'm going to get. And our job is on our own to ascend and to transcend the layers that cover us. And we learn that when Mashiach comes, all it's going to be, the only difference of now when we live in the world that we live in, and when Mashiach, the world that will exist when Mashiach comes at the end of times, is going to be that Hashem will remove. It literally says Hashem will remove the covering from the sun. And that's all it's going to be. Hashem is going to remove the film that covers the divine revelation. And suddenly we'll be filled with the knowledge of God. We'll get to see things from divine consciousness. We'll be able to realize how we're all one. And jealousy will disappear. Fighting will disappear. Wars will all end. Hungers will all end. Because when we see that we're all one, everyone's going to feed one another. Everyone's going to care for one another. So everything will be like, it's not like a magical world. It's only the same world with a higher consciousness. It's like everyone on psychedelics all the time, but feeling one with the world, right? But now we need to function. We're in a world of action. A world that we live in is Asiya. It's the fourth lowest world, or most external world of Asiya, of action. In order to have action and to have choice and all of the things that we do to merit that revelation, we now have to live with these coverings and do our own work to uncover them, to see beyond, to look deeper, and to see things from a higher consciousness. And like my friend teaches me, sometimes I ask myself, what would my highest self do right now, right? There's what I want to do and what I feel like I need to do to respond to a situation in this moment. If something is really hard, but I often tell myself, and there's many tools that we have to say, what would my highest self do right now? What would my highest version of myself do? And that allows us for a moment to glimpse into like another level of transcendence, of seeing. Let's see how much time we have left and what we can get into. By the way, if you're here with us on live, please say hello on live chat so I can see who you are, and say a shout out and hello. And if you're watching the video afterwards, please leave a comment, because I love when you meet me and tell me you watch the video, but I love it more when I can just see and respond and know that you're here and know that I'm not just talking to a screen. Okay, so this is where I want to take it even to our lives. How can this affect our lives? So we have this idea of Tzimtzum, of this vacuum, this void that's created. And then there's the opinions that say that there was a remnant of godliness. We understand now how there's a dual perspective. That's this opinion that we're going with, that there wasn't actually a removal of God, that God still fills. So the outcome of that is that God never left this space. He's still here, but there's layers covering it. There's films. So in higher worlds, in the worlds of the angels, there's the only difference is that in their worlds, they have less things covering the light, the source of light. And in our world, there's more layers and veils. And that's why we live in a world called Olam. Olam, the root word of the word Olam, shares the same root as He'elem, right? Olam, world. Let's pretend this is our world. Olam is Ayin Vav Lamed Mem, which means He'elem, which means hiddenness. Literally, the world we live in is a world of hiddenness. It's a world of hiding. That's the whole idea of the world that we live in. There's just so many coverings. And that's why many of us wake up every day and feel like we are in a world of fog and like a world of confusion, a world of darkness. And the world gets darker and darker as we go along because we are so lost, and people are so lost one another to seeing things as they truly are. And we are under so many layers, even of the trappings of our own mind. There's so many layers and things that cover us, baggage, trauma, and things that cover us from seeing the truth and from seeing things from a higher consciousness. And we're in here to navigate that. Now, Tzimtzum is such a powerful concept, this idea of Tzimtzum. I love saying it, right? Tzimtzum with some sem, to contract, to remove. Why is it such a powerful idea? The same way, now get this. This is where Tzimtzum becomes relevant. The same way that when Hashem began it all, and he was all him, Hashem existed, and he said, but this is boring, right? Let's create another. Let's create a world. Let's create a world of other individuals who feel independent, who I can have a relationship with. In order to have a relationship with another, the first step is Tzimtzum. And everything we learn in Kabbalah, Hasidus teaches us, is actually something that we can apply in our own lives. And when we are in that stage of life, and not just in the beginning, but every single day when we feel lonely and we say, I want room for another, I want to have a relationship with another, I don't want just, we start off especially as a teenager, as a child, the first stage of development is dependence, complete, like there are babies born without the awareness of self, without das, without even realizing, because they're one with their mother. Then they're born, and then then slowly, as they begin to stare at their hands, they realize, oh wait, like I exist. I'm my own person. I'm separate from my mother, right? And then the child develops a strong state of I exist. This is my world, right? A teenage show. It's the strongest when you're a teenager. It's like the intentionally selfish. It's called the there's dependent. Then there's the second stage of development is not interdependent, is the third stage. And the second stage is, I want to say selfish, but it's not. Independent. It's the independent stage, which in other words is I'm the only one. It's me. I'm myself. I'm my own island, right? And that stage of development is when someone feels themselves fully, right? It's my way or the highway. I don't want to listen to you. I'm not listening to anything my parents say. I want to do what I want right now and how it feels for me, right? And then comes a stage where you're so full of your own feels. How do I feel about life? What are my opinions, right? What are my wants? What are my desires? What are my dreams? What are my goals? And in order to have a relationship with another, we have to have a tzimtzum. In order to allow another in to the space where we fill all the space of our consciousness, my decisions, my life, right? When someone lives alone, their whole life is them. And the only way to truly have a relationship with another is we have to take out a space of ourselves. We have to have a tzimtzum, an inner tzimtzum. Needs to happen in order to allow another person into our life. Someone who doesn't do this is not going to be able to have a relationship with another person. They're going to continue, they could get married, but they're going to have a relationship with themselves, right? They're going to say, I love you, but what they mean is, I love how you make me feel, right? You're not loving another person, it's you. It's a marriage where only I exist and how you make me feel and how you serve me. And I'll do this because it feels good to me, but if it doesn't feel good to me, I won't, right? And that is not a true marriage. That is still a relationship with oneself. Without a true tzimtzum, a tzimtzum is creating a vacuum. It's saying interdependence. It's saying I exist, I have my own thoughts, my own feelings, my own ideas, but I also want to make space for another to exist inside my world. So I'm going to move myself over. I'm going to create a vacuum. I'm going to create a tzimtzum where I can make space for another person's opinions, for another person's feelings. So I can consider another person, where I can put myself aside. And this tzimtzum doesn't just happen in the beginning when we want to start a relationship. It's something that we need to do every single day. It is something that we need to continue to do every day, that we want to continue to have a relationship with somebody, another person in our life, our spouse or our fiance or a friend, or any true relationship with another. If you want to have a relationship with another, and a true other, not another person who echoes your feelings in a different, in a higher pitched or lower pitched voice. If we want to have a relationship with another, we need to learn how to have a tzimtzum and how to move ourselves aside and say, I'm still here, but I'm going to move myself aside to make space for another. I'm going to put myself aside a little bit and see what's another person's opinions. Can I hold space for someone's opinions who are different than me, even though they might and the natural instinct is no, that trigger that offends me, that hurts me, that triggers me. You can't feel differently than me, right? I don't have space for another because it affects my independence, my identity. But as we mature and as we grow up, we realize that we have to sacrifice, right, that independence to have an interdependent relationship, to say, I exist and you exist. Let's coexist, right? And let's share that. And only through that can we have true love. Can we have giving and taking and have a true relationship with someone else? So the Tzimtzum, and that's why actually it's one of the beautiful teachings of Kriyas Yamsuf compared to Shidduchim. It says that Kasha Kriyas Yamsuf, Kasha Shidduchim Kriyas Yamsuf, right? The Queen of Sheba asked Shlomo Melech, since the 7 days that God created the world, what's he busy doing, right? He made the Tzimtzum, world's created, poof, now what's he doing? And he said he's matching up people. He's making zivugin. He's matching people up. He's getting them married. And she's like, that can't be so hard, etc., right? And then the verse says, Kasha Shidduchim Kriyas Yamsuf, that matching people up is as hard as splitting the sea. What's the connection, right? And we have a beautiful teaching that I can link to another class. That in one of the beautiful connections is that sometimes Hashem can put two people together and have them meet one another, right? Hashem could manage the whole world. He can arrange for Miriam and Shlomo to meet up, but sometimes, and very often, and more often than not, where they're sitting for one another. And not you guys, obviously, but there'll be a couple sitting with one another, and Hashem is like, "Well, you're soulmates, go." And they're like, "But I don't. But I'm not marrying that type of person. I'm not making space for him in my life, right? To make space and to rip open our life, it's like splitting the sea. We have an ocean of all of our everything we've accumulated over our lifetime, our opinions, our values, and to let another person in is literally splitting your sea. You need to split your ocean, tear open your lifestyle to make room for somebody who likes different things, who messes things up in a different way, or who has a completely different lifestyle than you, just in the day-to-day living and with their opinions and their thoughts. I'm not letting that person in my life, right? That means I'm gonna have to tear open everything I've created. This ocean of the ocean representing the depth of all my layers, right? The ocean is the not just my shallow life, but everything deeper underneath me, and split for another person. And that's the difficulty. It's being able to, that's one of the answers or one of the levels of being difficult. And we learned that shidduchim doesn't just happen the first time to say, okay, I'm gonna split myself open and make space for this person in my life. Every single day, staying in marriage and staying with another person means every day splitting ourselves. Sometimes some parts get easier over time. You get used to some things, but you constantly have to split yourself. You constantly have to make space and open up the ways and open your heart and have your heart open and split yourself aside to make space for another to come in so they can have their room for them and their feelings and how they're consider them as well. And that's the avoda of Tzimtzum every single day in our lives. That's just one application of how we can connect to this Kabbalistic idea. I'm sure you can find so many more applications of Tzimtzum. It comes up all the time and how Tzimtzum applies in our life. And knowing this concept of Tzimtzum and how in order to have room for another, we need to have this separation or this removal of self, or even the concept of a Tzimtzum for another person where you cover or dilute something for their perspective, even though you still know the idea, but in order for my child to understand what I'm saying, I'm going to have to, move myself aside a little bit and say only a little bit in order for them to catch it, right? Sometimes I have to hold back everything I want to share because there's no time. I don't want to flood your brain. So that's why I'm going to end now. So hopefully if you guys have any other applications of how Tzimtzum can apply in our lives and you come up with things and you think about these specific ideas, hopefully they can inspire you in your life, in your day-to-day, and in different ways that you can find that this wisdom can bring wisdom into your dealings, your relationships, and your own inner work. Thank you so much for joining. And I cannot wait for next class where we will be discussing next Sunday night, where I'm going to be discussing the next stage of creation after there's that Chalal, this vacuum. What happens next with the Kav? What is the Kav and the arrow and the Rishimo, the remnants of godliness, the arrow, the spiral, and then maybe we'll even begin to talk about the four worlds that came into being afterwards. Thank you for joining. I want to take a moment to dedicate tonight's learning to my very, very, very close friend's son who passed away about 9 days ago, and 2 month old, beautiful, beautiful neshama. All of our learning today and everyone who's watching it should have in mind that it should be in the schus of David Menachem Mendel Ben Zev and Devorah Leah. We're davening for Hashem to heal and comfort you and all of Klal Yisrael. And before I go, I am so happy you're joining me, Michal, and Mif Tachim, and Rivka. Thanks so much for joining. Nighty night. If anyone has questions, you can post it now, and maybe I could still answer it because it is an interact. So we're trying to get this more interactive, move to a streaming platform so I can see people and people can talk and share. But for now, I'm going to stay online for a moment. If anyone has here questions or online, if you have any question, you want to type any question that you have or any comment or thought about Tzimtzum, let me know. So Tzimtzum, lo kipshuto, Tzimtzum, kipshuto. I learned a lot preparing this class because I didn't actually know the exact origin where the splitting of the opinions. I know that they were big opinions, but I didn't know where it started. I didn't realize it started all the way from the commentary in the Eitz Chaim, where already it's a Tzimtzum lav dafka. So that was new to me. A lot of like the actual studies of like where the splits began. I thought it began with like the Gra. I didn't realize how early back it went. But I do know that there was Misnagdim who wrote angrily to the Alter Rebbe when the Alter Rebbe quoted the Baal Shem Tov and saying how on how he was saying that Hashem is in every single space, even in the bathroom. And he said, how dare you say that about godliness? So it all boiled. He said, well, this is not my teaching. The Baal Shem Tov taught this. Hashem is in every single place. And it really all boils down to this disagreement on whether there was a removal of God or not a real removal of God. It's kind of like, am I here hiding and only you are covered? There's veils, or is the light actually diminished, or was the light fully there? The revelation of godliness never left. And I think that the other one, the second opinion, that God didn't actually leave, it allows for hashgacha pratis, allows us to know that Hashem's presence never leaves us. It might feel that way to us, but for me, it's more empowering to know that the light never is actually diminished. It's only that the coverings are there, to allow me to have free choice to see past the coverings. Okay, I'm going to end the live here. Thank you again, everyone, for joining.